All right, so welcome back, everybody. So thanks once again for all the patience this morning and going through everything with that. I know it's a pretty in-depth topic to get into exactly how to process all the cases and all the different nuances to the location form, but as we sort of wound up this morning, I think we are in pretty good shape, and hopefully we've hit the mark with the tools for the coders. This one, we're going to focus on the supervisor role and the different things that you can do there. There's a number of differences, a completely different interface, and some new tabs that are available on the left-hand panel and so on. So sort of similar. I mean, this is a smaller group. If you do have a burning question, by all means, that you want to ask out loud, by all means, feel free to jump in. I would ask that if you could mute yourselves to keep the recording clean, that would be great. And, if you need to unmute and jump in with a question, that's fine. Also, Gary, as you see here, has joined me again. He's on the chat to answer questions. So if it's something low key that you just want to ask a quick question in the chat and Gary can reply, that's fine. And then we'll have plenty of time at the end. Plenty of time for questions if we want to have an interactive dialogue. So with that said, I'm just going to jump right to it. So I'm going to start off once again, assuming that everybody saw the intro session that we did this morning with the coders, but I'm going to start off with a little bit of an overview of the supervisor interface, which is a bit different. So as you can see here, the supervisor interface, we've got some new tabs. So there is a home tab that you see here on the left-hand side in the screenshot below that displays some graphs and statistics for sort of the processing of cases. I'll get into that a little bit of a deeper dive in a second, but essentially you get into cases processed during the week, the month, the year. You can focus it on particular types of queues, whether it's all cases or fatal or truck bus, and you can actually get into a particular coder and you get a little graph there that cases across the timeline. So that's pretty interesting and new, and that's on this home tab. When I splashed quickly the last session with the priority coder, they have a home tab as well, but it's really just an informative tab of if they run out of the queue or if they have to click the get next to shift back to the manual the main interactive queue from the priority queues. But for the home tab with you guys on the supervisor side, you're going to have some specific functionality there, mainly this thing. Also, you have a report tab. The location, candidates, and search tabs are all pretty much the same across from left to right, but you have a report tab, which gives you an interface for generating some quick reports, mainly around, processing and status and productivity and so on. We'll get to that in a minute. You also have an admin tab, which provides you a bunch of administrative functions, which we'll get into. And then down in the lower right, similar to what you saw quickly when the priority coders come into play, is that we have 4 different grids down there, 4 different tabs in the grid interface below the map, and they're all 4 different queues. So you guys are going to be able to see the main interactive queue. That's not displayed anywhere, not even for the priority coders. You would ask for that during the design session, so you can, if you want to, go through and jump around and sort those grids and so on and actually process whichever cases out of the main interactive queue that you'd like to do if you need to. You also see the fatal and the truck bus queues by default. You don't have to turn yourselves on or off for that. You are known to be in the supervisor role when you log in, and we give you that. And then you have the 4th queue, and you're the only ones that see, obviously, the supervisor queue as supervisors. And those are the cases that are forwarded from the actual coders. And there's a little bit different columns in the grid there that we'll go through in a minute. So that's everything else the same, the map interface. When you are processing a case, it is identical for the most part, but you'll see how you can do it from each one of those, but pretty standard. So I alluded to this. So on the home tab, when you first log in on the left, you've got the statistics. So a bunch of cases, what you've done this week, what you've done this month, et cetera, et cetera. So there's sort of 3 components to this that you can control. In the upper left, the statistics can be filtered by all cases, fatal cases only, or the truck bus queue. You just click one of those buttons, and to flip it, it's sort of like a radio button when in the old days with the car, when you're pushing your, presets, you just click those. That's the type it is. By default, all is selected, so it's all cases. In the upper right, you're seeing all location coders, but that's a drop-down list of the location coders by name. So if you want to pick John Doe and pick that person, you'll see the new cases they've coded. And there's other productivity reports that get into greater detail that I'll show you in a little bit on that front. And then this is meant to be an overview. Down at the bottom is just a grid, but it's shown default by week, and you can flip it to month and year. Same thing as the cues up above. You just click the radio button type icon and switch the modes, and I'll show you that in a minute. But when we're processing cases, before I jump over to show you the actual app in a minute, I mentioned how you have the 4 cues. So once again, the main interactive cue is everything, but it's everything that's not fatal or involving a commercial vehicle. Fatal is clearly self-described. The truck bus queue is where a commercial vehicle is involved. And the supervisor queue is specific and only contains the cases. They're not from really any other. We're calling it a queue because it is, but it's not the same as the other 3. It's really only those cases that were forwarded from location coders. Each queue is basically displayed. I think I skipped this bullet. I apologize. I meant to delete this bullet. I copied this slide from the previous slide. But basically, you don't have to sign each other up for that. So it's not like one supervisor has to grant another one. You're all the same. You're all getting the same 4 queues. But the bottom bullet there is just like I mentioned in the last class. To process this, the same thing we talked about with priority coders. There's a little process button there on the left-hand side to process a case out of any of these. You click that, it displays the location form on the left panel, and we're good to go. So let's just talk a little bit about the supervisor queue for a minute before we jump in. So the supervisor queue is different. The main queue, the fatal, and the truck bus queue show similar columns. The supervisor queue, however, is only those cases that have been forwarded, and therefore they display really just 2 things. They display the case number and the crash date, the far left columns here. And then if you remember from the previous training, when they forward a case, what they do is they pick a reason from a drop-down list, like wrong street name, not enough info, street is missing, whatever. And they have an other category as well. And then they type in notes. And these are a couple of things that I just mocked up myself when I was forwarding cases for this. Things like, the location form shows the intersection of Bleecker and Bacon, but, the narrative conflicts and so on and so forth. So you'll see that there. So that's good. And once again, you process this like any other queue by clicking that. One of the things that I noted here is that within the grid that we're using here, the grid can be exported. Why would you really don't have to export a grid unless you really needed to look at you could do this for any reason, like you could export the fatal queue if you wanted to have a spreadsheet of it. And the way you export these grids is you can just right click anywhere on the grid and anywhere in the row. It doesn't matter what field you are, you just right click and you'll get a context menu that comes up and it says export, as you see here. And then if you just slide off to the right, you'll get a sub menu, which is you can export to. The difference between CSV and Excel they're basically the same. XML's different that you probably don't need. So you'd probably just pick Excel and it would just open up, it would download an Excel spreadsheet with all these columns in there, and you could go through and look at, if you needed to go and do some detailed reporting on an exact queue or do some statistics. We haven't really talked about that before, but the grid control we're using in Clear allows you to do this. So that's a nice little feature. The reason that I pointed it out on the supervisor queue is because it struck me that when I was looking at this is that if somebody writes a pretty long explanation in the notes field when they're forwarding a case, you may want to be able to export this and just be able to, do a word wrap or whatnot in Excel and start to, print these things out in advance and start to go off and research them and look at things and so on. As I mentioned to the guys today on the location coder training, they could print a map or export a map for you. So maybe they shoot you an email and they say, here's the map. This is what I was looking at on the screen. And, they can, sort of give you a little bit of a narrative that indicates that. So if you wanted to marry up an Excel spreadsheet that you exported from the supervisor queue with a few of the screenshots that they're capturing for you, that's a potential technique. So that's what the supervisor queue looks like in terms of that type of stuff. Before we jump over to reports, I thought I'd just jump over here and log in. So once again, I'm going to go on the landing page and click the launch button. I'm going to log in as B. Simpson, and that is our supervisor role. And here is the interface that I was talking about. So you can see that we're logged in as a supervisor. This is the administrative panel on the left here for the statistics. So this is all cases. Obviously, you can see that we were geocoding stuff today. So we jumped from none because we cleared all these queues and things before the training, and we're up to 3 that we were doing and so on. I can switch over to fatal and truck bus queues and flip between these, right? I can flip to any of the coders. So months was the one that we were doing this. So and months did a couple cases here. We just reset this right before this training. So if you're wondering of why the stuff from the previous training isn't there, it's because Gary reset it for us so that we could start over. But if you remember, we ran out of cases in our queue for our training cases. So we've reset this. So this is just stuff that Gary and I did just right before this training. And then, but you also can flip this down here to month and year, flip back to all coders and so on. And so this is a nice little interface for you to just get a feel of, what are we doing and how quickly are we making progress? So obviously more stuff under the report menu to come in a minute. This is what I was talking about earlier. So here's all the queues that are coming across here. So you have the main queue. We only have 5 more records left in the main queue. The supervisor queue, I jumped in and forwarded. This is the screenshot you're seeing on your slide now. So you can see how there's not a, if they're the far right columns are over here as well. But when you start looking at this in terms of the notes, if they type something lengthy, you might not see it. So what I was talking about here is I'm going to right click my mouse button here. See how we have export show up? I'm not clicking the mouse button anymore, by the way. I just hover over it and it will bring out this next context menu. So if I hit export to Excel, this is how Chrome does it. If you're in Edge or something else, it'll be different. But you can see how I've got export, and this is the second time I've done this. So I've got export1.slx. If I just click this, it's going to open up in Excel, and I'm going to end up with exactly what I see on the screen. So now you've got the full thing. We've got forward reason. The one thing that we've got to look at here that I just noticed is since we have the forward reason 1, 2, 3, it's exporting out the number representation of this from the pick list. So we may end up looking, if you guys think this is valuable, is adding an export button here where we can control this. But we'll take a look at that. But this struck me recently. So, if you wanted to sort of formulate a report and resize fields and pick this and say wrap text and, be able to read this and so on, and then print this out and go off before you jump in here and do some research, you certainly can. So I thought that was a nice little feature that's already built in, but we can look at this if this was important for you in terms of the numbers versus the words. So that's the way the queues look. They're all pretty much identical. You got the main queue, and if we jump to fatal and the truck bus, we're seeing just the basic information about the crashes. If we are going to come in here and process anything, once again, I won't get into, a lot of detail around the guts of this, but if I wanted to process this, let's say if I want to process this out of the truck bus queue, you just click the process, and then it opens up, and the user interface looks very much like a regular location coder. You jump right into this, and I can go ahead and see it looks like I'm 250 feet south of this or west of the reference marker there, and I click that, and I get a couple of candidates back. And now notice that within here, when we flip back, it just goes back to the queue. But once again, even though the queues are here, I can slide this if I want. I can just minimize that. If I like, I can flip open the crash report, close that and bring that, so I can do all that type of stuff. So I've got 2 candidates here. I've got reference marker here, reference marker there, and we've got differences of things here. Once again, if I want to accept one of these, I can just go ahead, and click accept. Are you sure that is? Yes. And I'm saving the candidate. And you can see where we went from 6 to 7 processed here. If you go back out to here, right, so I've got this now. If you get here, I was doing this earlier, and I just want to make sure that people don't people realize this, because we covered this a little bit in the course, but not only a little bit. If you minimize the queue panel to make this fully large while you're processing a case and you're done, it goes back to the default interface. And what it does is you don't see this. So right down here, it's really hard to see probably on your screen, but if you click the up arrow, it's going to basically expand the queues and expose them once again. You can see how our truck bus queue is empty. We just processed this crash. We're good, but the rest are all still here. So if you decide that you want to minimize this, it's going to come back minimized after you process a case. So don't think that, uh-oh, where am I? You're in the same spot you did when you entered the app. It's just that you minimize that. So feel free to, do this however you want, but keep that in mind. So let me jump over back to the slides, and hopefully this will get into the other stuff in terms of reporting and admin stuff. So once again, this is your home tab. That's additional. Then we've got a reporting and an admin tab that are also additional. This stuff is pretty much self-explanatory, but we will come back to this in a minute and process a couple things. But do want to just jump back over, and we'll start back up with the slides. So the reports. So we talked about with some of you the design of a few reports that will really help you do this. And one of the things that is important to note is that although reports, a lot of times we're generating a report that might be a PDF or something static where there's really no interaction in it. These reports, I almost put in air quotes to a degree because we're doing them live as part of the application. And you'll see that when we get into this, you'll see that we have things that are hyperlinked, and we can drill down into the reports. We can actually launch directly when we get down to a case level. Everything will drill all the way to a case. And then when you click a case, you can actually bring it up and go reprocess the case if you need to. So there's a lot of flexibility. So although they're reports, quote unquote, they're interactive reports, they're dynamic, there's some functionality that you can still get to. So there are 3 reports that you guys had requested. The location coding workflow summary report, that's a pretty long name, but it just shows the number of cases that are in each queue. And that example is actually down here. We'll drill into each of these with a couple of slides, and then I'll demo each. The location coding performance report is then showing basically the number of cases that were processed, as well as the time per case for each user. So this is key. So this is going to show for each user, they've processed this many cases. This is their average number of time per case. This is how many they've forwarded, etc. And there's a time frame with this, date ranges and so on that you see over here. And then there's a batch job performance report, which is showing the performance and statistics of the nightly batch processing. So we'll get into each of these. So there's 3 different types of reports, pretty nice. So this is the workflow, the location coding workflow summary report. So once again, it shows the number of cases in each queue by county, okay? So how do you run this? You just go to the report tab, you go and you select that report type from the dropdown. This all the interfaces for all the reports look identical pretty much. For this particular report, there is a date range that is optional, and you have to click this to pick a date range. I think this is in large part due to, cases are going to come in and out of each queue. So for the most part, you may just want to be running this and say how many are currently in the queue. But if you wanted to look at what the queue was for a particular date range, you can do that. So you basically pick your date range if you want, you select that and you click run. So what does this look like? Well, at the top is the initial report that jumps out at you. So it is displayed on the right-hand panel. Each county is displayed as a row, so you can see that the rows are going to be 1 for each county. The columns are going to be the main queue, the fatal queue, and the truck bus queue. So you can see from this little screenshot, if you can read it, that there are currently 2 items, 2 cases in the main queue for Onondaga County, no fatals, no truck bus. Montgomery, 0, 1, and 1, and so on. For all of these reports, by the way, I believe it's all of them, the initial report that is generated can be exported to a PDF. This is sort of the main report. And so you can click that. So if you do want to take this grid and you export it as a tabular report in a PDF format, you click this and it will do that for you. If you want to close the report at any time, you can click the close report button on the upper right. The other thing that should be noted is that pretty much every one of these reports that gets generated, the main row delineator, in this case it's the county that we're aggregating to, is presented as a hyperlink. So the county name is a hyperlink that if you click it, it will present a drilled down sub-report that's a little more detailed. So Onondaga County shows there's 2 items in the main queue: no fatal, no truck bus. If I click Onondaga, it's going to drill down, and you can see where it gets a little bit more detailed. It says counties Onondaga, 2 in the main queue, 0, 0, which is basically what was up here. But now it shows you a grid that's different. It breaks it down by case number, and I can see that I've got this case and this case, the crash date, et cetera, et cetera. How many days it was in the queue, and don't go by our development servers here. We're messing around with the data all the time, but you'll see that this is all that, and this case number is actually a hyperlink that takes you to the location form if you want to view or optionally reprocess this. So when you get to the next, this last little slide that I want to show you is, if you were to click, let me go back to the previous slide for a second, bear with me. So if I'm here, if I click this, this is where I go on the next slide. It basically opens up the location form. It shows you the crash report just like you would. However, we're in sort of read-only mode. Okay, so if you look down here where you normally see the process button when you're actually processing a case, it's a checkout button for now. So basically you're in read-only mode. If you look closely, you'll see in the screenshot how all the fields are grayed out. So it's read-only mode. If you wanted to go back and just view the report, you jumped in here, you looked around, what was the location form? Why was this in the queue so long? Whatever it might be, then you click show report, will just take you back above the, to the previous report. We'll go back to that. So it's almost like we have 2 modes where we jumped back into the location form mode as a minute, and you can just click the show report above the crash report to go back. However, if you do in fact want to process this, if you click the checkout button down here, this will enable the whole location form. Everything will cease to be read only. The gray text will become black, and the checkout button will turn into process, and you're off and running. And when you're done with that, if you do in fact process the case, you'll go back to the report. So before we go to the next report, let's just jump in and just show you that. Okay, so if I go to the report tab, I'm going to go and I'm going to pick the location coding workflow summary report. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about a date range. I just want to see them all right now. So I'm going to hit run, and you can see where I've got now. I showed you earlier the exact, when we looked at the main queue for the supervisor role, you could see these exact 5 crashes because there's so few of them. Obviously there's going to be many more in your main queue. So these numbers are going to be pretty much traversing across all 62 counties, and you're going to have a whole variety of items. But for now, we've got a limited number, and here they are. Once again, if I want to export to a PDF, right, I can hit export to a PDF. It generates a PDF of this. If I open this up, here is the PDF of this exact grid. Okay, pretty straightforward. If I want to close the report, I just hit close the report, and it's going to come back here. If I want to rerun the report and generate it again, I click run, and I'm back here. Okay, all of these reports have the same 2 buttons when you first get to this main report: export to PDF and close it. But if, as I mentioned, you want to go through and just click on Onondaga County, it drills down, and now I've got a sub-report here. So the sub-report basically shows me the county name, the details, and here's the cases. So if I said, oh my God, this is, however long in the queue, etc. If I want to go in here and click on it, it takes me into the actual case. It looks like I'm processing it, but I'm not. I can click checkout. Now, if I come back up here and just say, all right, I want to get out of this mode, you just flip back and say, show me the report tab again. Okay, so if I come back in and click the case, here I am. Now, if I want to process this case again, now typically what you're going to probably see, once I hit checkout, I'm going to check this case back out, and you're going to see there's an administrative function for you guys to check a case back in. And what we mean by checking the case out is that whenever a location coder starts processing, they open up a case. Whenever a case is hitting their location panel, that case is checked out from the main queue, or any queue for that matter. And the reason that we refer to that as checked out, we lock the case. So a checked out case is locked. And the reason for that is this: if you have 6 location coders all pounding against the main queue, as you know, this is the way LCDE works really as well, is that if you have one location coder pull record number 1 from the queue, that needs to be locked so that when location coder number 2 goes and pulls the next record, they don't get record number 1 as well, they get the next one. So location coder 1 gets record 1, 2 gets 2, 3 gets 3, and then if location coder 1 finishes theirs, then they're going to get 4, right? And the next one they check out. But the other ones are locked and we know it in the database. So that's why we use the word check out, and we'll come back to that in the administrative function. So if I click check out, now look what happens. All this text becomes live, all my controls are live, this turns into a process button, and I'm good to go. But if I don't want to do that, I have the close button. I can click close, and that too closes all this stuff up and goes back to the report. Now, up here in the upper right, whenever we're down in a sub report, you can go back to the main report. So this, we can't export this out of here. However, what you can do is you can always export the grids, because this grid control we're here, this grid control, everywhere you see a grid, you can do this export dance where you can right click on it, you can pick an Excel spreadsheet, and you can export just the grid and do something with that. But if we're going to go back to the main report, we can click that. Now we're back to the main report, and then we either export it or we close it and we come back out here. Okay, so that's the first report. That's the workflow summary report. All of them work almost identically, but they are slightly different. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and we'll jump back in and go to the next report. Next report is the location coding performance report, which is basically getting at the performance of each location coder. This was clearly something important for you guys to be able to get at quickly. So much like this does have a date. You have to delineate a date range. So while the queue generalization of, you know, how many are in each queue, that's sort of typically going to be run from the current perspective. How many are in there right now? So the date is optional. This one, though, the date is required. You have to say between this date and this date. So you pick the location coding productivity report, enter a from and to date. These from and to dates can either be typed in, or there's a little calendar icon, and I'll show you that in a minute. So I can sort of do whatever I want here and click this, and you can pick the dates from there. Then you click run, and the report generates. So what does this report look like? It is the same type of construct where you have export to PDF and close. This one is going to list one sort of consolidated row per location coder. So here is the location coder end months. You can see whether a coder, a supervisor, or a priority coder. You can see the number of cases they've processed out of each queue. So if they had 3 in the location coding main queue and 3 in the fatal and 2 in the other, you would see those listed here. Then they would have this total cases processed. You'll have the total time per queue. The average time just divides 25 divided by 3. And then you'd have this whole full total cases. So if you had, you know, average time per case that is different between each queue, you'd see the full consolidated average times here. So this is really helpful to just see how coders are processing things. And then if you want to actually see the actual cases that they located, that they location coded, you click their name and it drops down here. The other thing that's really cool about this is that it's going to show you every single case they did, how many seconds they were in, what was the total elapsed time, when they started, when they finished, and the status of what they did. So this was just manual location coding, and you're going to see there's different things here. The reason that you'll see this is manual, this is interactive versus batch. So when we start looking at things, there's other things here. So really good. It's really cool detail that's going on here. Okay. And once again, same thing, clicking the case number will display it. So if you see this, you're like, oh my God, what happened here? You know, this took, you know, 24 minutes. What's going on? You could open the case and look directly at that. Okay. So before we go to the next one, let's just go ahead and jump out to ICL and run this. So I'm going to go to the location coding productivity report. And here is the type of calendar widget you have. So I could say from you know, November 1st, it doesn't matter. As long as I go to today, we're only going to get these few cases here. But that's the calendar control you have. So I'll hit OK. And so now we've got, 3 different coders. So I've got B. Simpson as a supervisor, has done 4 out of the truck bus queue, average of 52 seconds. C. Wiggum as a priority coder. They forwarded all 4 of theirs to the supervisor. So, that's not great, but that's because of what I'm doing here, right? If you saw that, you'd probably have to have a little bit of a deeper dive. And then month, sort of the same thing. These are not reflecting the previous training class. Like I said, these are prep things that we did between the training classes, but you get the gist of what this is going to do. So if I wanted to say, well, what and months looks like they forwarded, right? So they, instead of it saying manual location coded, they forwarded it. So, okay, well, that makes sense. This one, they took forever, it looks like, to actually decide to forward it. So let's open that up and look, and we can see, and if you remember from this morning, that was the Bleecker and Bacon Street that I forwarded. We can check this out and so on, or we can just close it. So that's what this does. And I'll go back to the main report now. And this is, really nice detailed information about each one. So you're typically going to see what did they location code out of the main queue, out of the fatal, if it's applicable, and out of the truck bus queue, and all these times and so on. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's that one. And then if I come over, the final report is just a batch performance. So if you pick the batch job performance and you pick a date range and click run, it's going to just show you what the status of the batch performance of the nightly batch geocoding is. So what does this look like? Well, it's going to show you the date. So this is organized by date. The batch geocoding job might have started at 1:03 a.m. and ended at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it ran for about 4 hours, and it did all, these statistics, you can disregard the numbers. Certainly don't pay attention to why the numbers are they are. They're just, sort of in our development server. But nevertheless, you'd see how many attempts it made and how many it processed, anybody that it failed to process, and success rates and all that type of stuff. This is to sort of just really monitor this and make sure that there's nothing really terribly wrong going on a nightly basis, that, you're getting a ton of cases that go to the interactive queue because batch is not processing properly. The date is what the hyperlink is. And so if you click on that, once again, you can literally get into all of these cases that were attempted to be processed by the batch. And click each one and jump in. So very, very cool. So before we jump over to the administrative functions, just wanted to jump in and just do it quickly. So here's a batch performance. I'll just leave the dates as is. Here we go. We've got different batch dates here. You click in here. Here's the cases and so on. And, pretty straightforward. So I'm going to just leave that at that. So that's the reports. I hope that makes sense. And it certainly gives you, I think, a lot of flexibility and understanding the pace at which cases are being processed in whole in its entirety based on a geocoder. I should say a location coder, and breaking down all the statistics in a pretty detailed way. So with that, let's jump into the administrative functions. As I mentioned before, the admin tab is another tab. So from left to right, we talked about the home tab having that graph, the report tab having all those reports, and then the admin tab has 3 different ways of administrating ICL for those of you that are supervisors. So we have the ability to define a high priority date range. This is, if you remember with the county filter I mentioned this morning, they could flip and choose a county to focus on. If you told them, focus on Jefferson County or so on, you can do that. But optionally, they could also you could come back here and say, I really want you to focus on January right now. Let's get through January. You could set that. And what that's going to do is it's automatically going to make them pull from that date range. So it changes the priority of the main interactive queue. And if you set January 1st to January 31st, it's going to go and it's going to do that. And that's all they're going to get from the main queue until there are no more cases. So whenever there is either a county filter or a high priority date range, or even the priority queues like fatal, when it's done and you exhausted that, it will go back to the regular main queue. So, but for now, this is what you would set for a date range. The privileges allows you to set priorities, location coder statuses. You can inactivate, deactivate, activate coders, and then checked out cases. There are times when perhaps a location coder is in the middle of doing something and their system crashes, or they get up and they leave the case checked out and it's been checked out all night, and somebody else is sort of needs to be doing something. You can constantly sort of monitor this as a little bit of a dashboard and just say, I've got a case here that's been checked out for 3 days. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want it to just fall by the wayside. I'm going to go ahead and check that back in. And then once you check it in, you unlock it essentially, and it goes back into circulation in the main queue. So let's just tackle these one at a time. So once again, the high priority date range, you can just basically specify a from and a to date. You can type them in. You can pick the calendar icon, but you set this as the date range, and then you click the set button. A little confirmation dialog will come up. You click yes to confirm that you want to set that date range, and that will become the actual high priority date range until there are no more cases within it, that date range. If you go back in here and later you say, I want to clear this, there are no more cases, or I don't want to focus on January anymore, whatever it is, you just come here to the admin tab, you come over here, click the clear button, and then you click yes on the confirmation dialog. Same thing. Okay, so let's jump out and do that. So I'll come over here to the admin tab, and here's the interface. So there are no dates set right now, so it is just coming out in order. But if I were to set, and I'm not going to worry about the dates, these are all older crashes in here, but just to show you what it would look like, if I were to say, I want to set it for the month from, November 1st, 2021 through December 31st, say 2021, I can hit set, and it says, are you sure you want to update that? Yes. So that is in fact the update date range. Now, if I did that, looking at this queue, none of these would come out. Follow me? So it's looking at the crash date. None of these would come out. But this would basically prioritize that date range. If I wanted to clear that date range, I come here and I just hit clear, and it says, are you sure? And I say yes, and we're back where there is now no date range, and so all the crashes would be subject to cycling through the main queue. Okay? Let's talk about setting privileges. So setting privileges, this allows you to either activate or deactivate a coder, or assign them either fatal priority or truck bus priority. Every location coder that is in the system that is given the location coder role is going to be listed here. And if you have a bunch of these, you can paginate through them, but this grid will expand a little bit. But that's what you're looking at here, is every location coder is listed. So if you wanted to, we don't have to remove a user from clear. So you don't have to call Andrew and ask him to, to pull a user unless they've left DMV, for example, or something like that. But temporarily, if you wanted to deactivate somebody for some reason, all you have to do is come in here and uncheck that button. And so if C. Wiggum was somebody I wanted to deactivate, uncheck it, hit save, they will not be able to participate in ICL. They're a user in the system, they can log in, but when they get there, they'd see a little message. Secondly, what you can do is assign them into one of the priority queues. So if you said right now it looks like N months is a regular coder from here, right? They have no fatal and no truck bus. They are active, but they're not either of these priority coders. And they would not show here if they were a supervisor, because you guys don't need to manage each other. So therefore, we know that they must be a regular coder, where C. Wiggum has been assigned a priority coder with just the truck bus queue. They have not been given fatal privileges, so that's where they're at. Okay, so what does this look like from the application? This is basically what you were just seeing here. So here in the application, so if right now, I'll just log out here and I'm just going to show you this. So right now, C. Wiggum has both of these. All right, so I'm going to log out. I'm going to log in. And I'm going to log into C. Wiggum. And C. Wiggum, you're going to see has both the fatal and the truck bus queues here. Okay. Now notice the difference between a priority coder and you guys is you guys have the main queue and the supervisor queue. This is what a priority coder looks like. And their home tab, they do not have the full graph and so on. It just says, hey, welcome, you are a priority coder. Please view the priority, the work over here and focus on that first, okay? And you saw today that if we finish one, we can, it'll tell them and it'll go back to the main queue. So they see both that, okay? So bear with me a second. I'm going to log out. I'm going to log back in as the supervisor, Supervisor B. Simpson. I'm going to log back in, and I'm going to go to the admin tab, and I'm going to take the fatal away from C. Wiggum. So the only thing I should see when he logs in now is truck bus. So I save that over here, log out, log back in, C. Wiggum, and see what we come up with here. So now we no longer have the fatal queue showing up as a tab. It's only one. Notice that since there are no more crashes in this queue, this is what the home tab now displays for that priority coder. Hey, you only have the truck bus queue, and this is all clear. So therefore, just click Get Next, and you'll revert back to the main queue. And now they shift from the look of a priority coder to a regular coder, and they're ready to go. Okay. And I'm going to log back out of there. I'm going to log back in over here as B. Simpson, back as an administrator and supervisor, and keep on going. So that was the administrative tab for set privileges, right? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Checked out cases real quickly. So checking in a checked out case, which is basically locked, this allows you to see, here's a case in this screenshot where it was checked out for 9.5 hours almost. And, well, we should probably, there's something wrong with that. We don't want to have a case. There's no way a case should be checked out for 9.5 hours. So you could release that and clear the lock on it by checking it back into the system. So to check in a single case, from here, you would come here and say, if I wanted to check in just this one, you can click the check-in button. You're going to get a confirmation dialog, and you just click the continue button, okay? If I said, okay, all of these look messy, I've got a whole bunch here, I'm just going to check them all in. You can just click check all in, click continue on the confirmation, and you're going to check them all back in, okay? So pretty simple there, okay? So showing you what that looks like. Here's the checked out cases. And I don't want to, I was going to try to just check out one and leave it checked out a minute ago, but we cleared this out. But essentially, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think I have to really demo this. So basically, when you click this technically is checked out. So if I go over here, I'm doing it to myself here, but you can see where I've checked out this case, and it's been checked out for, matter of seconds. But that's why it shows up here. We've checked out that. Nobody else should get that from the main queue. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you actually look at this, and you would be the ones that would be able to see this, is when you look at it, anything that is checked out in any of these queues will appear with a grayed out little icon. See, I can't process this. I can't click it. This one I can. This one down here, though, it says, even with the tooltip, this case is checked out and cannot be opened at this time. But, I'm sort of doing it to myself, but I checked this back in, and it says, oh, that's right. If you do it yourself, we actually trap that and go, excuse me, you're in the middle of doing this, right? So I can go back over to the location tab and actually continue to process this case. If I close it, it releases the lock. This guy is back. And if I go to admin, that's not there. But if anybody else does that other than yourself, you can actually go and do that. So I know that was rather quick, and I hope that makes sense. And I don't mean to, fly through everything, but basically that is the differences with the supervisor stuff. So, just being respectful of your time, that's what I prepared, and I'm happy to stay on and answer questions and demo more. But, I'll open up the mics to you guys and see what you think, and if you got any questions.
This is Brian. I think it all looks great.
Cool, thanks.
Is that Jamie?
Yeah, you broke up a
Yeah,
little bit there. Yeah, go ahead, FJ.
looks good, guys.
I
This
would
is Mike. Looks good.
I go into to assign attributes to people. Is that totally out of the picture now then?
Sorry, you broke up there. I didn't hear the whole thing. Can you re-ask it, FJ?
Yeah, in the past I had to go onto New York Gov and sign people up for
Oh,
LCDE and the newer
yeah.
part of the process.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention this actually right after you finished, Larry. Um, so the new process, it still uses their ny.gov ID. So the normal process to get everyone the ny.gov ID, there's something called portal, and that's where we kind of administer all the users for Clear. And there's a process where you go in there and you would take their ny.gov ID and just add them as a user in there. You can basically import the ID from ny.gov ID. I can do that, or we could probably have one of you guys over there be an admin in there too, so you can go in and just pull those ny.gov IDs in and assign them to the ICL group. So it's a pretty clean, neat process. It's not too complicated. However you guys want to do it, I'm in there managing all the other Clear users, so it's not too hard to just pull in a name that you give me, an ny.gov ID. But we can give you guys access to that too if you want to have that.
Yeah, I think we would like to have access, and we can put in everybody initially unless you guys want to do that, just so we learn how to do it.
Yeah, we'll get the portal set up, and then maybe we can make Gary just kind of worked with me a little bit to show me some of the portal stuff and some of the there's some other stuff in there too, but yeah, we'll set up a little training on the side and just go through that process, and once that's set
fine.
up,
Thank
just
you.
let me know who you guys want to have in there.
It'll be
and to follow up.
it'll be Brian.
No, go ahead, FJ.
Go ahead. It'll be Brian, Mike, and myself.
You and
Okay.
Brian?
Brian, Mike, and FJ.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured. All right.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, one of the things that I hope is an improvement and that we added in there is that once you add them in through the administrator interface that Andrew's talking about, to add the this ny.gov user in as a location coder so they have access to ICL. Once you do that through the main administrative interface that you guys are talking about now, from then on, you can do it right through ICL. You don't have to go over to the administrative interface. If you remember back to the original design sessions, that's why we had the ability for you guys to say, I just want to deactivate that person. I don't want to go in and monkey around with ny.gov and the main administrative. I just want to deactivate them, or I want to quickly make them a fatal location coder right now. You don't have to get into a really heavy duty administrative back end with accounts. You just do it right through that admin panel in ICL. So hopefully that will help expedite some things when you got to do it quickly. Other questions, other thoughts? Just open up for whatever feedback you guys have. And if you want to take the tact of, sort of thinking about it and, consolidating any questions you may have or feedback, by all means, feel free to do that, but happy to stay on the line and answer anything right now.
Larry, this is Brian. I got one question.
Yep.
The reports, can we run them at any time, like throughout the day? Are they going to bog anything down if we're running them like 20 times a day? Does that matter?
No, it'll be fine. No, there's nothing that's going to bog it down. You can run it anytime you want. It does a really quick query on some of these things. It's going to be completely trivial in terms of performance or interruptions. So, yep, go ahead and go for it.
Awesome. Thank you. That's the only question I got on my end.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah. Well, oh, I lost my connection here, everybody.
We can
Larry,
hear you.
thank you. And you can still hear me. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you, Larry, for that. And appreciate you guys being on from DMV. Hope you got what you needed out of that. And it sounds like you did. Like I said before, you know where to reach us. We'll be in touch with more, details, obviously, when things are happening. So, yeah, just reach out. And also, I don't know if you guys have Robert Zatowski's email over here on my side. We had a few changes in our office. Regina retired. I don't know if you knew that, but she retired, and I'm doing some of that stuff now. But Robert also can help over on our side if you guys have any questions or need something from us.
Yeah, and I'll also we'll send you out the recording of this session. Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate the positive feedback. And we'll send you out the recording. We'll send you a copy of the slides and all that good stuff here shortly. So stay tuned for that.